with Frank Reynolds.
Good evening. In Washington today, the Senate rejected amendments to the gun control bill that would have required gun owners to obtain a license and register their weapons. The Senate's action was a serious setback for those who favor strong gun control legislation and who argued that a strong bill would help to cut down on crime and violence. The President's Commission on Violence in America held its first formal session today. It produced a disagreement between the director of the FBI and the Attorney General. Details on both stories now from ABC's Sam Donaldson in Washington.
The Senate today turned back every attempt to require the registration of firearms and the licensing of their owners, whether by the federal government or the states, and is now moving toward a final vote on the main gun control measure before recess tonight. The bill will extend to rifles and shotguns the same ban on mail-order sales that now applies to handguns. But strong gun control advocates under the leadership of Maryland Democrat Joseph Tidings hope to require registration of firearms and licensing of owners, a move Tidings said would help drive fear and danger from the streets. Opponents argued that the law-abiding citizen would comply, but the criminal wouldn't, so what good would it all accomplish? Despite the emotional impact of Senator Edward Kennedy's presence on the floor, his first time there since June, the key Tidings amendment was defeated 55-31, and similar ones by equally large margins. While the Senate was debating the gun bill, the Commission on Violence was taking its first testimony, and the lead-off witnesses, Attorney General Clark and FBI Director Hoover, disagreed sharply on the role of police in the quelling of civil disorder, like that which occurred recently in Chicago. Hoover, in the course of a statement in which he assailed permissiveness toward lawbreakers, said Chicago police were faced with vicious attacking mobs, led, he said, by ruthless, lawless leaders. Therefore, Hoover concluded, police had no alternative but to use force. And the FBI director said it was a tribute to authorities that the Democratic National Convention was not disrupted. Attorney General Clark, on the other hand, stressed that confrontations between police and citizens can be controlled without excessive force and violence by police, even when police are under great provocation, he added. Clark said it's the duty of law enforcement to control violence, not cause it, to relieve tension, not to look for a fight. And of all violence, Clark said police violence was the most dangerous.
Above all citizens, it is the policeman who must follow the law. Who is to protect our rights when he doesn't? No, there was no direct reference to Chicago. The description was of general application. The police are the most important men in the United States today. Our safety and our liberty depends upon their performance. The people have to support them with everything they have.
But is it your impression that the minimum force necessary to enforce the law was used in Chicago?
I can't make a judgment as to Chicago. The matter is under investigation.
Hoover, who did not speak to reporters, did agree with Clark on one thing. The news media were not at their best in Chicago. Clark said reporters exaggerated the actions of both sides. Hoover thought reporters distorted the efforts of police to preserve law and order. This is Sam Donaldson in Washington.
In New York City today, Roselle Hyde, the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, said the FCC does not plan to investigate television coverage of the Democratic National Convention. Hyde said that letters from the public complaining about TV coverage reflect what he called a healthy public concern. And Hyde said the television networks should learn their own lessons from Chicago.
Hello, I'm Amy Vanderbilt. After a spring shower, the air sparkles with freshness. Have that outdoor freshness indoors with Glade Air Freshener. Use Glade throughout your home. Glade cleans your air like a spring shower.
Lemon Pledge, very pretty. Put the shine down lemon good. Lemon Pledge as you're dusting brings new luster to the wood. Lemon Pledge clean so easy. Lemon way to make wood glow. Lemon Pledge as you're dusting adds protection as you go.
You like brand new Lemon Pledge, the fresh, clean way to get the beauty of waxing with none of the work. As you dust. New from Johnson Wax.
Go ahead, splash it on and get the Frostline lift. The Aqua Velva Frostline lift. Want a lift with Frostline. Frostline is the refreshing new aftershave with livelier lines for that Frostline lift.
There's something about an Aqua Velva, man.
Get that Aqua Velva Frostline lift.
Hi there. So what's he doing in my shop with his electric razor and Williams electric shave? Okay, so the electric shave does make your whiskers stand up. So it does lubricate your face and give you a close, comfortable shave. So, a shave that feels barber close with your electric razor? Sure enough. Look for the big L, first letter in.
In Fresno, California today, Richard Nixon told a group of farmers that if he is elected president, he will pick a cabinet of what he called big men with big responsibilities. Mr. Nixon said, "I don't want a Secretary of Agriculture who basically is a puppet for the White House staff." And he added, "I don't want an errand boy in the cabinet." George Wallace campaigned through Missouri today. He criticized both Vice President Humphrey and Mr. Nixon, and he said both his opponents are desperate and worried about his candidacy. The Vice President today urged the Senate to ratify the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty as soon as possible. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee approved the treaty yesterday. The full Senate has yet to act. Humphrey's call for prompt action contrasts with the view of Richard Nixon, who recently said that while he favors the treaty, he opposes ratification at this time. Mr. Humphrey made his latest appeal in his Washington office.
We stand at another crossroads where we must choose between the long, hard road to peace or the road sloping downhill to nuclear war. And we must choose not next January, next year, but now. Let the American people understand clearly what Mr. Nixon is saying. And let them understand that failure to act this year could mean killing this treaty forever. It could mean the end of our long and patient efforts to hold back the flood of nuclear destructive power to nations around the globe. And this is an effort that we have been engaged in since the Baruch Plan in the 1940s at the United Nations. I don't think that we can afford to play political games with anything so serious as the spread of nuclear weapons. On this issue, there is no safety in equivocation. This is an invitation to disaster.
In Los Angeles today, Joseph Sorrell, the campaign manager for Vice President Humphrey in Southern California, said his office has run out of money. Sorrell told ABC's John Davenport that the Humphrey campaign in California is foundering. In Washington, a spokesman for the Humphrey campaign office admitted that they are having trouble raising money in California, but he said that any impression that the campaign for California's Electoral College votes is coming to an end is just false. Some of the national polls indicate that the vice president may be having other troubles. ABC guest commentator Stuart Alsop has some theories on the dip in the Humphrey popularity.
Whatever happened to Hubert Humphrey? Something very odd and a bit inexplicable seems to have happened to him. A few weeks ago, for example, I wrote a column for Newsweek in which I remarked that nobody hates good old Hubert. The remark was perfectly honest. Humphrey has always been one of the best-liked politicians in Washington. I got a flood of letters, the burden of which was, "Listen, brother, I got news for you. I hate Hubert Humphrey." This queer phenomenon has been reflected in the polls, of course. It wasn't all that long ago, after all, that Hubert Humphrey seemed to be the front runner in most polls. Now he's at least as far behind Nixon as Harry Truman was behind Tom Dewey at this time in 1948. So what has happened to the poor fella? Well, Robert Kennedy's murder was a political disaster for Humphrey, of course. The convention was a second disaster. Humphrey's first week of campaigning, which made him seem inept and waffling, was a third disaster. But it does seem to me that there's something else at work here as well. You know how in school, the other kids sometimes single out one unhappy boy as target for the night, taking out their frustrations by ganging up on him and hazing him unmercifully. I wonder if something of that sort hasn't happened to poor Hubert Humphrey. There seems to be something more personal and ideological in Humphrey's sudden fall from grace. He's target for tonight for the left, after all, as well as the right. He seems to have become a sort of national whipping boy. Everything is his fault, from the war in Vietnam to the hippies or crime in the streets. The unexpected does happen in politics, especially in 1968. But if Humphrey can come back to win in the next 7 weeks, it will, I think, be as big an upset as Harry Truman's surprise victory in 1948, and maybe even bigger. This is Stuart Alsop in Washington.
I'm inclined to agree with everything Stuart Alsop has just said. But it might also be said that the election is not being held tomorrow, and the fact that Mr. Humphrey has nosedived in the polls very recently ought to remind us that if he can go down, he also can go up, and maybe he will. If the newspapers and television keep insisting that he is all through, some people might begin to feel sorry for him, especially if every time he gets up to speak, he is insulted by some self-righteous moralist whose memory is as short as his manners are bad. Hubert Humphrey may not be the happy warrior anymore, but he is still a warrior, and he will be one until the votes are counted. Until that happens, notwithstanding the present polls, maybe it is just a bit premature to count him out.
Here's Joe, our favorite policeman. Yesterday, his feet were killing him. Foot troubles can make you feel bad all over. Now, look at Joe today. He feels like he's barefoot in clover, nice, soft clover. He soaked his feet in Johnson's foot soap. This medicated formula in hot water soaks away foot miseries, softens corns and calluses, puts your tired, aching feet in clover. Get Johnson's foot soap at all drug counters.
And Sue, your Lanacane really calmed my awful itching. First program I've enjoyed in months.
Wonderful. I've found Lanacane works fast on most any itching problem.
That's because Lanacane breaks the itch cycle. You see, itching causes scratching. Causing more itching, more scratching. But Lanacane calms irritated nerve ends, quiets urge to scratch, breaks the itch cycle, checks bacteria, speeds healing. So for itching problems anywhere except your eyes, get Lanacane medicated cream.
At Columbia University in New York City today, 30 students, all of them suspended for their part in the student demonstrations and disorders last spring, tried to force their way into the gymnasium to register. Police kept them out forcibly, and there was some scuffling. The suspended students and their sympathizers are insisting on a general amnesty for everyone involved in the spring difficulties. They demand greater student participation in the operation of the university. There are other demands, too, by one campus group or another. The radicals, of course, insisting on much more than the moderates. ABC's Marlene Sanders, in recent days, has talked with university officials, faculty, and students, and files this report on Columbia Today.
On the surface, it was a peaceful summer at Columbia University. All traces of the battles of April and May are gone. Buildings that were occupied by more than 700 students are now tranquil. Flower beds that were trampled as police battled students are blossoming again. But nearby, the red flag of rebellion was raised. Students for a Democratic Society continued their debate over goals and tactics at their liberation school. Che Guevara is a symbol of their defiance, as Columbia is a symbol of much that they despise. The campus revolt is against a society that produced the Vietnam War and which has not ended racism. The radicals oppose what they feel is the university's complicity in both. In the summer, President Grayson Kirk resigned. The acting president, Dr. Andrew Cordier, is attempting to heal the wounds.
What I'm interested in doing on this campus is to unite it, to end divisions, to end the kinds of problems that led to very deep divisions on the campus last spring, and on the basis of unity, to move ahead on programs and policies which are so challenging, so exciting, so purposeful, as to engage the interest and the support of a unified campus. That's my objective, and I'm going to pursue it with great determination this year.
A group less radical and much more numerous than SDS has emerged from the spring disorders. Students for a restructured university are more sympathetic to reform and discussion. They negotiated during the summer with alumni, faculty, and the administration.
We're saying to the administration, to the trustees, to the powers that be, this is your chance to really be responsive to a group of people who are really willing to work with you. If you are not going to be responsive to us, and that's not because we're, a particular group or whatever, we are, I believe, representative of the broad majority of students at Columbia University. If you are not responsive to us, if you do not take into account the feelings of this majority, then I think you're going to have to deal once again with those groups who feel as adamantly as you do about these things, but are willing to take different kinds of actions. And then you're going to have buildings taken again, and then you're going to have disruption. And then it's going to be all in their little corner, the trustees and the administration. It's their fault and their baby, and has absolutely nothing to do with what we've tried to do.
But there was already disruption by SDS. Members tried to force their way into a faculty meeting being held to vote on a new set of rules governing dissent and discipline. Campus police kept the rebels out. Chairman of that meeting on student unrest was law professor Michael Sovereign.
For many of them, they see themselves in a society that's committed to policies that they regard as reprehensible, and they are exploding over that. The university is a handy target, and some of the radicals believe that this stuff they chant about the university being the handmaiden of the military-industrial complex, and so they can, for themselves, justify striking out at the university for decisions that, in fact, the university had nothing to do with.
Then nothing really that the university could do would satisfy, say, the SDS.
Well, the SDS is a motley group. It's possible that some of them would be satisfied by gestures of the university, but I think you're right. The strongest possible actions by the university responsive to student wishes would not be likely to leave the toughest of the SDS leaders satisfied. There's a statement made by Tom Hayden recently in which he said that the SDS students want a university standing against the mainstream of American society, or they want no university. Well, universities aren't in the business of standing against the mainstream of society. They're places for scholarship and teaching.
But another kind of learning takes place now almost daily at the Sundial on College Walk. Students stop to listen as SDS member Stuart Goodell once again exhorts the crowd, restating the grievances against the university, but not saying what new confrontations are planned.
I would say that there's a good chance that the students on this campus, the workers on this campus, and the community will resist the attacks and will resist and will attempt to end this university's participation in the war.
With what methods would you...
I think that direct action will probably be taken against certain parts of this university, against those parts of those targets within the university which will best point up this university's ties to the small group of trustees, of boards of directors who run this country and who run this country's foreign policy. And will also be aimed, of course, at actually materially stopping this university's expansion into the community. And what we're attempting to do on this campus is to change our own lives, as well as to defend the lives of the people of Vietnam and the people in this community. And that's, to me, is certainly more important than the kinds of studying that are offered at this university. Critical study within SDS, analysis, that kind of studying, which goes on all the time, which is necessary for a political movement, which is tied to the activity of men, that will continue during the year. But I cannot define myself in the way this university would like me to.
On this campus, I do not intend to respond to ultimatums or to demands. I intend to follow a policy of full, complete discussion. I told some of the SDS that I would be willing to sit up all night with them in talking over all of their points, but not in a spirit of threat, not in a spirit of demand, not in a spirit of ultimatum.
The warning is clear, and the new policy has already begun. More campus democracy is in the offing. But it seems unlikely that reforms at the university will satisfy the SDS, who want nothing short of a new society. The administration hopes that the vast majority of the students will settle for a more democratic university. Columbia reopens next week, and the forecast is trouble. This is Marlene Sanders at Columbia University in New York.
The strongest cleaner in your house is Sanaflush. It's too strong for your walls and your windows. It's too strong for your sink and your stove and your floors. But Sanaflush is not too strong for your bathroom bowl. Sanaflush gets that hygienically clean. Sanaflush, powder or liquid, the strongest cleaner in your house.
With everybody telling you what to do with your wash.
Use a strong blade stain remover, pre-soap, do you?
You've got to be confused. So, we invented Day-Bright Bleach to simplify things. Use a strong bleach or pre-soak for tough stains and safe Day-Bright for everything else, including synthetics, permanent press, colors. There's nothing better and safer than Day-Bright, with borax and 2 brighteners to help whiten and brighten. Safe Day-Bright Bleach. It simplifies things.
Actor Franchot Tone died today at his home in New York City. He was 63 years old. American military sources said today there are about 30,000 North Vietnamese troops now massed along the demilitarized zone, possibly preparing for the enemy's fall offensive. B-52s have been keeping up a series of raids in the area to try to blunt or prevent the offensive. The U.S. sources also estimate that some 20,000 North Vietnamese soldiers slipped into South Vietnam last month, either across the DMZ or down the Ho Chi Minh Trail through Laos and Cambodia. At the peace talks in Paris, the United States and North Vietnam seemed as far apart at the end of the 22nd session today as when the meetings began 19 weeks ago. North Vietnam's chief negotiator, Xuan Thuy, today called attention to recent statements by UN Secretary General U Thant and French President Charles de Gaulle to support North Vietnam's insistence on an immediate and unconditional halt of all American bombing of the North. The United States negotiator, Cyrus Vance, again said today the United States is ready to stop the bombing only when there is reason to believe that North Vietnam seriously intends to move toward de-escalation and peace. Moscow repeated today its contention that the Kremlin has the right to intervene in West Germany to stop any revival of militarism and neo-Nazism. An article in the Communist Party newspaper Pravda said the Soviet Union has this right under the Charter of the United Nations and the Potsdam Agreement. Great Britain joined the United States and France today in reiterating a hands-off warning to Moscow. ABC's diplomatic correspondent, John Scally, says the Soviets conjured up the German threat in order to justify their invasion of Czechoslovakia, but that the Germans can't really be sure it's all just propaganda. Thus, says Scally, the Allies had to reassure West Germany that immediate assistance would be forthcoming in the event of any move by Russia. Well, the Tiger is king in Detroit today as the town still rocks from last night's pennant win, its first in 23 years. We'll have the uproar in a moment.
Ah, such a beautiful house. And it's all ours.
And the bank's.
We can put the sofa there and grandfather clock here.
And this is the den.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Take the easy chair.
Does it come with an ashtray?
Oh, here. Try this.
Thanks. I'd like to try another cigarette, too. Tastes hot.
I know what you mean. Pick these up today.
Long size cools? Sounds promising.
Come up to the cool taste.
Taste extra coolness in an extra length.
Say, honey, you got those cools?
Right here.
Like them?
Uh-huh.
Come up to the cool taste.
Try new Cool Filter Longs, the only extra-length cigarette with a taste of extra coolness. Cool Filter Longs, Cool Filter Kings. 2 sizes, 1 taste. A cool taste.
The American League pennant is flying over Detroit for the first time in 23 years. No one understands Detroit's years of frustration better than Al Kaline, who emerged from the twilight of a brilliant career, as they say, to score the biggest run of his life last night. Few players or towns have waited longer for a baseball party, and few, if any, have staged a bigger celebration. ABC's Dave Dials has that story in Detroit.
This was the scene in downtown Detroit well into the wee hours of the morning. And today, the town is picking itself up from a long-awaited baseball hangover. It is fitting that the Tiger who's waited the longest, Al Kaline, scored the winning run in a pulsating ninth-inning rally against the New York Yankees. He walked in a pinch-hitting role. At 33 and with 15 seasons behind him, Kaline, no longer an everyday performer, got to third on a single and a walk. Then with 2 out, Don Wirt, a 198 hitter, delivered a single to right. And Kaline crossed the plate with a run that raised the pennant in Detroit for the first time since 1945. At age 19, Al Kaline hit .340 to become the youngest American League batting champion in history. And 8 times this perennial all-star performer has hit over .300. But a simple walk in a pinch-hitting role and the run that followed filled his cup to overflowing, just as it did for the long-suffering fans. Nearly 50,000 of them pouring onto the field. Kaline said he had a feeling he'd do something special in this game.
I said on the bench that if I got a chance to get in there, I was going to do something to help the team win. And this is the God's truth. I said it on the bench. I had a feeling that I was going to be able to do something. I didn't know what it was going to be. I knew that I was going to do something to help the ball club win. It wasn't much I got on base, and the other guys came through with the hits. But I was there, and I scored the winning run, and this has got to go down as one of the big thrills for me at all times. I've always said that, Dave, that as you said before, I haven't done much all year long, but I wanted to do one thing, that's play on a pennant winner, and I've done it, and I'm glad I've done a little bit to help the club.
He's been helping the Tigers for 15 seasons. Now there are others to help him, and that's why, for the first time, Al Kaline's with a winner. Dave Dials, ABC News, Detroit.
Well, that's tonight's news and comment from Mudville. I'm Frank Reynolds. Good night.